Sirens wailed under the trending scream as phones flashed like judgment. Ava Reed said, "Tell me this is a prank." A headline called her a fraud. A clip looped, trimmed to cut trust. Miles' heart smirked in a studio bite. He spoke in velvet knives. Ava Reed said, "He knows that's not the truth." Comment: storms rose, each wave sharper. Lina Cho said, "Do not post, breathe, then water." The hashtag marched like a courtroom drum. Brands ghosted without farewells. Ava Reed said, "I gave them my best years." A meme crowned her with thorns. Victor Crane texted a neutral condolence. It read like a funeral program. Doors shut online faster than locks. Ava Reed said, "If I stay silent, I drown." The city blinked cold neon. The night leaned in to listen. Morning did not arrive so much as accuse. Headlines marched across breakfast like ants. Ava Reed said, "They cut the clip to make me a villain." Lina Cho said, "Our first move is restraint." The kettle shrieked as if it knew. Miles' Hart's quote framed her as unhinged. Ava Reed said, "He was there when I covered for him." A brand email withdrew with polite daggers. The silence of allies felt loud. A neighbor's door shut a fraction too fast. Ava Reed said, "If I apologize for a lie, I become it." Lina Cho said, "We need receipts and timing." The window showed a city that had already decided. Coffee cooled into a small failure. Ava Reed said, "I will not vanish." The day pressed down anyway. On morning shows, strangers tried to narrate her soul. Clips looped until truth thinned. Panelists laughed like a gavel. Ava Reed said, "They called me unstable." Victor Crane said, "We're pausing distribution." The word pausing felt permanent. A makeup artist canceled with a heart emoji. Ava Reed said, "He sold them the performance." Lina Cho said, "We leak context, not rage." Miles' Hart added new color to his lie. The audience nodded along with the rhythm of certainty. Ava Reed said, "I kept quiet to protect him." The producer's email asked for a comment by noon. The clock ticked like a countdown strapped to her chest. Her voice stayed level while the floor tilted. Outside, cameras multiplied like rabbits. A drone hummed above her street. Ava Reed said, "They are building a cage with angles." Emma Reed texted nothing again. Lina Cho said, "Use the back exit." A paparazzo asked if she cared about victims. The word victims cut twice. Ava Reed said, "I have one truth and 100 cuts." A neighbor recorded from a balcony. The gate stuck, then surrendered. Miles' Hart posted a prayer hands caption. Ava Reed said he wraps slander in silk. A siren made the air shake. Someone cheered the spectacle. She kept her face forward and her hands from shaking. They reached the car as a question speared the air. "Why did you do it?" someone yelled as if truth were a raffle. Ava Reed said, "Ask why the clip is cut." A shove rippled the crowd. Lina Cho said, "Back up, respect space." A horn barked like a dog. A lens smacked the window. Ava Reed said, "I will not confess to his script." The driver cursed softly. A teen whispered that she used to admire her. Ava Reed said, "Hold me to what I did, not what he sold." The door shut and shut nothing out. The city leaned close, hungry. She stared at the screen and chose not to speak. The rehearsal room smelled like dust and pine, a memory that steadied her hands. Ava Reed said, before cameras, there was breath and a mark on the floor. Lina Cho said, "Your breath is still yours." Ava Reed said, "Then why does it shake?" The mirror kept old tape ghosts where she once pinned notes. Ava Reed said opening nights felt like cliffs and wings. Lina Cho said, "You jumped and taught others to jump." She remembered coaxing a forgotten line back into a scene. Ava Reed said, "I cued him with a look and the story lived." Lina Cho said, "Craft is proof when rumors burn." The radiator hissed like a crowd that refused to leave. Ava Reed said, I want them to meet the worker, not the headline. She pressed the script to her heart and waited for the room to answer. Home carried the quiet of mugs, chipped and loyal. Ava Reed said, I learned to steady a scene by stirring the pan slow. Lina Cho said, then we stir today slow. The kettle lifted a small fog, like stage haze. Ava Reed said, he called me a storm, but I am a builder. A plant leaned toward the window like a student. Lina Cho said, we answer with patience and receipts. Ava Reed said, patience feels like losing in public. Lina Cho said patience is winning in time. The timer beeped and felt like applause in miniature. Ava Reed said, if I feed the day, maybe it will not bite. She wrote 3 lines of truth and crossed out 1 soft word. The room exhaled with her. She opened a shoebox that rustled like curtains. Ava Reed said, fan letters are little stages. She read a note about courage found during chemo. Ava Reed said, they loaned me bravery, and I owe returns. Lina Cho said, keep the ones that anchor, archive the rest. A Polaroid showed her grinning with smudged eyeliner. Ava Reed said, that night I forgot myself and remembered the story. She tucked a charm bracelet into her palm for weight. Ava Reed said, if I am a villain now, I will still write back. The radiator clicked in tempo with her pen. She answered 2 letters and breathed like a metronome. Lina Cho said, this is the voice that will outlast noise. The box felt lighter, the room larger. The cafe glass made her reflection share a table she could not reach. Ava Reed said, she used to steal my sweaters and finish my lines. Lina Cho said, give her time to return to the scene. Emma Reed stared at her phone and stirred nothing. Ava Reed said, I wish silence had subtitles. A barista called a name that was not hers. Lina Cho said, we will not chase a fleeing lens. Ava Reed said, I want to say I am still me. The street offered umbrellas like shields. The door opened and closed without a script. Ava Reed said, if family pauses, I must become my own witness. She pressed her palm to the glass, then let it fall. Her face kept the line from breaking. Night folded around the apartment like velvet curtains. Ava Reed said, if the crowd owns my name, I will rent it back with truth. Lina Cho said, record for yourself first. She set a phone against a stack of books and framed her shoulders. Ava Reed said, I learned to speak to one person and let others overhear. The first take cracked like ice. Ava Reed said, again. The second found breath and spine. Lina Cho said, that is your voice. She saved the clip without sending it anywhere. Ava Reed said, not yet, but soon. The city hummed like a sympathetic orchestra. She turned off 1 lamp and kept the small one burning. The call came like a door slamming in her chest. Ava Reed said, the brand just pulled out. Lina Cho said, we expected 1, not 5. Emails arrived with sterile farewells. Ava Reed said, I carried their perfume across the world. A sponsorship banner was stripped from her social profile. Lina Cho said, their silence is profit math. Ava Reed said, then I am subtraction. Her phone vibrated again. Another deal gone cold. The kettle hissed, but no one rose. Ava Reed said, do they believe he owns my face too? She folded the contract into 4 sharp corners and tossed it into the bin. The sound felt final. Lina Cho said, we will rebuild, but first endure. Ava Reed said, I am not sure how many walls I can lean on before they all fall. She scrolled, but the screen scrolled her. Ava Reed said, I cannot keep up with the lies. Old tweets surfaced, bent out of time. Miles Hart's followers called her hypocrite. Ava Reed said, I was 19, not a monster. Lina Cho said, context will not trend. Notifications stacked like tombstones. Ava Reed said, they read 1 line and burned 10 years. Her thumb hovered over delete. Lina Cho said, erasing is admission. Ava Reed said, then I carry scars in public. A meme mocked her expression during a charity gala. Ava Reed said, they make comedy of grief. She dropped the phone onto the couch like it burned. The room's silence sounded like agreement. Dinner was only noise. Emma Reed's fork clinked, but words did not follow. Ava Reed said, you could say something. Emma Reed said nothing. Silence folded like a wall. Ava Reed said, your stillness is sharper than their screams. Emma Reed set down her glass with slow finality. Lina Cho said, you don't have to choose exile. Emma Reed stood, chair scraping like judgment. Ava Reed said, if blood hides, what chance do I have with strangers? The door shut before an answer. The candle sputtered, then died. Ava Reed said, even my table withdraws. She did not clear the plates. She could not. Outside a theater once hers, posters had been stripped bare. Ava Reed said, my face used to hang there. A passerby whispered her name like poison. Lina Cho said, do not stop, keep walking. Ava Reed said, I helped build this stage. Her breath fogged in cold air. A vendor recognized her and shook his head. Ava Reed said, even strangers know the script. A torn playbill clung to a lamppost. She reached for it, but wind carried it away. Ava Reed said, they erase me and leave paper ghosts. Lina Cho said, ghosts remind us we existed. The marquee lights blinked, but not for her. The night news ran his interview. Miles Hart said, I only speak because I care. Ava Reed slammed the remote down. Ava Reed said, he rehearses betrayal like theater. The anchor nodded along like an accomplice. Lina Cho said, they do not ask him for proof. Ava Reed said, because he smiles like scripture. Her chest heaved as the screen froze on his grin. Ava Reed said, I gave him my trust, and he feeds it to cameras. The phone buzzed with another sponsor exit. Ava Reed said, every door shuts with his words. Lina Cho said, tomorrow, we counter with evidence. Ava Reed said, tomorrow may arrive too late. She pulled the curtains closed against the light. The email leaked at dawn, stamped confidential in red, yet splashed across feeds. Ava Reed said, that's his handwriting. Lina Cho said, he drafted Liza's memos. Screenshots glowed like torches. Ava Reed said, he rehearsed my ruin before the first headline. The betrayal cut deeper with every line signed. Lina Cho said, we now have proof he engineered this. Ava Reed said, and they worship him for it. The kettle clicked, but no one moved. Ava Reed said, he called me unstable while he planned the script. Lina Cho said, we must decide when to reveal it. Ava Reed said truth should burn as fast as lies. Her fist trembled against the counter. A grainy clip surfaced next, hidden angles and whispers. Ava Reed said, that's the rehearsal we swore was off record. Miles Hart's voice bled through. We'll frame her as fragile, and the audience will buy it. Ava Reed said, he rehearsed betrayal like blocking a scene. Lina Cho said, someone filmed this to bury you. Ava Reed said, or to bury us both if the time came. The camera caught his grin as she fed him a cue line. Ava Reed said, I was giving him light, and he hoarded it as weapon. The clip looped, laughter where it should not be. Lina Cho said, the world must see this whole. Ava Reed said, if they'll watch. In the alley, Omar Patel shifted like a man carrying weight. Ava Reed said, you were there that night. Omar Patel said, I was recording background sound, and I caught more. His voice cracked like old vinyl. Ava Reed said, you held the truth while I drowned. Omar Patel said, I feared they'd burn me too. Lina Cho said, then why now? Omar Patel said, because his lie grows bigger than my silence. He slid a USB across like contraband. Ava Reed said, does it prove what I lived? Omar Patel said, every second. The air smelled of rust and rain. Victor Crane sat across polished glass, jaw tight. Ava Reed said, "You knew he planted this." Victor Crane said, "Studios don't care about guilt, only optics." His watch ticked like judgment. Ava Reed said, "You hid his draft, his plot." Victor Crane said, "He earns money, you drain it now." Lina Cho said, "We have receipts that will scorch." Victor Crane said, "Truth costs more than well pay." Ava Reed said, "You chose betrayal over loyalty." Victor Crane said, "I chose survival." The silence grew heavier than the boardroom air. Night bled into her apartment, but clarity cut through. Ava Reed said, "They crowned him hero with my blood." Lina Cho said, "Now we crown him liar with his own words." Ava Reed said, "The mob wanted a monster, and he dressed me as one." She pressed the USB into her laptop. Ava Reed said, "Now they will see who wrote the script." The screen lit her face like firelight. Ava Reed said, "Truth may not save me, but it will damn him." Lina Cho said, "Then let the truth burn." The keys clicked, and the file uploaded. The upload detonated like thunder across midnight feeds. Ava Reed said, "They are watching the rehearsal of my ruin." Notifications stormed back in furious waves. Miles Hart's face froze mid-lie, played against his draft. Ava Reed said, "They see his script now." Lina Cho said, "Some will twist even this." Ava Reed said, "Let them twist. The truth is written in his own ink." Screens scrolled faster than breath. Ava Reed said, "If redemption comes, it comes in fire." A message pinged, "Maybe we were wrong." She exhaled like a stage curtain dropping. Lina Cho said, "The crowd won't all switch, but the cracks have started." Ava Reed said, "I only need the cracks wide enough for light." The studio doors trembled as cameras waited outside. Ava Reed said, "He will be inside, won't he?" Lina Cho said, "He agreed to a rebuttal on live air." The hallway echoed like a drum roll. Ava Reed said, "Then I will not whisper anymore." She adjusted her jacket with steady fingers. Lina Cho said, "Do not let his smirk set your pace." Ava Reed said, "He stole my silence. I'll take it back with sound." Producers whispered, "Hungry for spectacle." Ava Reed said, "Let them feast. I'll give them truth raw." A red tally light glowed through the glass. Her pulse hammered like stage cues. She stepped toward the frame that would carry her voice to millions. The lights baked hotter than stage fire. Miles Hart leaned back with a rehearsed calm. Ava Reed said, "Why didn't you tell them the rehearsal was fiction?" Miles Hart said, "Because fiction sells better than truth." His smile cracked for the first time. Ava Reed said, "You wrote my downfall in advance." The audience shifted audibly. Miles Hart said, "I saved myself." Ava Reed said, "By drowning me." She slid the leaked memo across the table. Gasps cut the silence. The host stammered for words. Ava Reed said, "You betrayed not only me, but every witness who believed." Miles Hart's jaw tensed, his eyes flashing panic. The cameras did not blink. Clips spread instantly, hashtags splitting like wildfire. Ava Reed said, "For once they share more than my tears." On street corners, screens replayed her words. A vendor clapped once, then twice. Ava Reed said, "Do they see me, or the fight?" Lina Cho said, "Today they see both." Her inbox filled with strangers, apologizing, tentative, imperfect. Ava Reed said, "Forgiveness tastes like smoke." A teenage girl posted a video wearing Ava's line from a past show. Ava Reed said, "Maybe I am still more than a scandal." The city, for the first time in weeks, did not lean hostile. It leaned curious. Backstage, silence roared louder than applause. Ava Reed said, "It is done." Lina Cho said, "You gave them truth, now it breathes on its own." Ava Reed said, "He will spin again," but this time his mask cracked. She leaned against the wall, every nerve alight. Lina Cho said, They may not crown you innocent, but they will not forget your fire. Ava Reed said, I do not need their crowns, only my spine. A crew member nodded silently as she passed. Ava Reed said, the stage that ruined me is the same stage I used to rise. She closed her eyes and exhaled. For once, the air did not taste like ash. Morning arrived without ceremony, but the air felt lighter than the night before. Ava Reed said, they are still arguing in my name. Lina Cho said, they can argue while we live. Apologies trickled in, uneven and clumsy. Ava Reed said, some say sorry like they are laundering guilt. A lawyer offered statements that sounded like scaffolding. Lina Cho said, we do not build on rotten beams. A small theater emailed a quiet invitation. Ava Reed said, they remembered the worker, not the scandal. Miles' heart trended for the wrong reasons at last. Lina Cho said, let his record speak while we move. A brand asked to return with softer money. Ava Reed said, I will not rent my face to amnesia. Emma Reed texted a single line, then a second. Ava Reed said, she wants coffee, and I want courage. The city made us sound like shoes on fresh stage paint. Lina Cho said, resolution is not applause, it is breath. Ava Reed said, then I will keep breathing on purpose. The cafe smelled like oranges and rain, a mercy she had not earned but accepted. Emma Reed said, I froze when they shouted your name. Ava Reed said, silence is a bruise that looks like skin. Emma Reed said, I thought my words would set me on fire. Ava Reed said, fire already found us. And I stood in it. A server placed 2 mugs like small peace treaties. Emma Reed said, I was ashamed of being afraid. Ava Reed said, I forgive fear when it stops steering. Emma Reed said, I should have stood between you and the lens. Ava Reed said, stand beside me now, and that will be enough. Outside, umbrellas bloomed and closed in a nervous rhythm. Emma Reed said, I believed lies because they arrived first. Ava Reed said, truth is late and stubborn, but it stays. Emma Reed's hand shook as it reached across the table. Ava Reed said, you still know my lines. The room softened, without losing its edges. Emma Reed said, I am here, even if I am learning how. Victor Crane's office held the kind of quiet that buys itself protection. Victor Crane said, legal recommends a joint statement to cool the temperature. Ava Reed said, temperature dropped when truth rose. Victor Crane said, investors want words they can quote. Lina Cho said, quotes without repentance are branding. Victor Crane said, I can call it oversight and move on. Ava Reed said, you watched me drown and timed your breath. Victor Crane said, I preserved a catalog worth billions. Ava Reed said, you spent decency like small change. Papers waited for a signature that would not come. Lina Cho said, withdraw your support of him or speak his name clearly. Victor Crane said, careers end when we choose sides. Ava Reed said, a career is not a spine. He looked at the city as if it would answer. Lina Cho said, silence will cost more than speech today. Hein Daniel Raid. Victor Crane said nothing for a long time, and the quiet finally sounded human. Back at the rehearsal studio, dust motes danced like brave little understudies. Ava Reed said, this room remembers me kinder than headlines do. Omar Patel said, I owed the truth and paid late. Ava Reed said, debt honored still counts. Omar Patel said, I kept quiet because rent was louder than justice. Lina Cho said, you spoke when it could change more than a feed. A director thanked her without cameras, and it landed like balm. Ava Reed said, I forgot how silence can be gentle. Omar Patel said, sound can be gentle too when it carries care. She marked a scene, and felt her body trust the mark. Ava Reed said, I am not the clip they made of me. The radiator hissed like applause that knows its place. Lina Cho said, begin with breath, as always. Ava Reed said, and let the work close the door behind us. The room answered with space enough to move. Night pressed its cool palm against the window as the city dimmed to a survivable hum. Ava Reed said, I will post the statement, but not the wound. Lina Cho said, leave them facts and keep your marrow. Ava Reed said, I name what happened, and I refuse to hate what remains. The draft was measured, neither apology nor victory lap. Lina Cho said, we sign with proof and with limits. Ava Reed said, I forgive the crowd, but not the machinery. A notification chimed and did not change her breathing. Emma Reed sent a photograph from childhood, a reminder in soft colors. Ava Reed said, I remember the girl who wanted stage lights, not spotlights. The cursor blinked like a quiet metronome. Lina Cho said, press send when the line feels true. Ava Reed said, it does. The post went out and did not ask permission to exist. The room held, and the future did not threaten to break. Dawn pressed a quiet palm against the glass, while the mirror hummed with bulbs. Ava Reed said, tonight I stop explaining and start performing. Lina Cho said, let the work be the argument. The script lay open like a repaired wing. Ava Reed said, every page survived smoke. Powder lifted in the air like dusted courage. Lina Cho said, you do not owe catharsis, only truth. A text from Omar promised seats saved for family. Ava Reed said Emma will come because she can breathe again. A voicemail from Victor held a careful apology. Lina Cho said, we take the apology and not the leash. Ava Reed said, no leash ever again. She traced the taped X on the floor with her shoe. Ava Reed said, I remember how to land. The city answered with sirens that did not call her name. Lina Cho said, the stage is not mercy but it is honest. Ava Reed said, then honesty will be my light. The alley behind the theater smelled of rain and paint, a rehearsal of weather. Miles' heart waited with hands in pockets like a stage direction. Ava Reed said, you chose this door because it has fewer ears. Miles' heart said, I came to fix what broke. Lina Cho said, you broke it on purpose. He searched the ground for a gentler story. Ava Reed said, you wrote the memo and called it concern. Miles' heart said, the machine needed a sacrifice. Ava Reed said, you called that art, and you called me the fire. He lifted a palm, rehearsed for sympathy. Lina Cho said, no cameras means no rewrite. Miles' heart said, tell them we are complicated. Ava Reed said, complication is not an alibi. Wind rattled the door like a cue. Miles' heart said, then what do you want? Ava Reed said, for you to hear me and for them to stop echoing you. Silence finally learned to listen. The audience settled like tide pulling chairs into a quiet shore. Ava Reed said, you do not know me, but you met my rumor. A soft laugh cracked and then held. She stepped to the mark and let breath measure the room. Ava Reed said, I was edited into a villain and almost believed it. Lights warmed like honest daylight. Lina Cho said, take your time. Ava Reed said, a cut can hide context, but it cannot erase labor. She spoke of craft, of nights owned by rehearsal and coffee. Ava Reed said, I cued him when he went blank, and he used my cue to unmake me. A murmur rose and fell like a conscience. Emma Reed squeezed Omar's hand in the third row. Ava Reed said, I will not beg for belief, but I will show you work. Silence turned generous. Ava Reed said, if I am guilty, it is of trying to hold a story together. The lights held her without burning. After the bows, a Q&A felt like walking through a careful storm. A man asked if she wanted revenge. Ava Reed said, I want accuracy more than amends. A woman asked if forgiveness is free. Ava Reed said, it is costly, and I am paying slowly. A teen asked how not to drown in noise. Ava Reed said, choose one person to hear and speak to them. The moderator glanced toward the door as reporters gathered. Lina Cho said one last question. A voice asked if fame is worth this ruin. Ava Reed said fame is a chandelier hung over a trapdoor. A ripple moved through the rows like a thought taking shape. Emma Reed said she would still choose the story. Ava Reed said, I would choose the work, even if the world chose the cut. The room applauded as if clapping for themselves. Later, the city settled into a blue hum, and her apartment felt earnestly unfinished. Ava Reed said, he will try to spin again. Lina Cho said, spinning cannot bind a wound already named. Ava Reed said, they may still doubt, and that is their right. A notification blinked and faded, then stayed faded. Emma Reed sent a voice note that sounded like a lullaby learning words. Ava Reed said, I forgive slow, but I forgive. She opened her front camera and found a face that had survived editing. Ava Reed said, I am not a redemption arc, I am a worker. The cursor waited like a measured breath. Lina Cho said, if you need a last line, make it small and sharp. Ava Reed said, small blades cut the cleanest. She hit record and let the room still. She looked into the lens until it stopped being glass. She gave them the truth without ornament. She said one line and left it there.